Hello, I'm Jordan Metcalf. I'm a professor of pulmonary and critical care medicine at the University of Oklahoma. My normal job is to take care of critically ill patients and patients with pulmonary disease, and I do research in a laboratory as well at the university. What I'm here today to talk about is a new trial that we are participating in to test a new therapy for COVID-19. As everyone knows, we don't really have very good therapy. It's a very new virus, so we haven't really had time to catch up with the virus. The virus is quite a bit ahead of us. With that, I'll defer to any questions or... So the suggestion came actually from my boss that this might be a good thing for us to do. And so I looked into it, and I was actually looking for a trial like this. I participated in 2 previous trials at the university using this same therapy against the flu, against the H1N1, the pandemic flu. And so I was the obvious choice to work on this. And I basically heard through our people that there was a trial that was approved by the FDA last Friday that is going to be led by the Mayo Clinic to take the serum plasma from people who have recovered from COVID-19 and to give it to people who are really ill with COVID-19, because we really don't have any proven effective therapy. The idea is that if you have recovered from COVID-19, you have very likely, in 39 to 40 cases where someone has taken the time to measure this, make significant amounts of antibodies to COVID-19. And there are some small trials from China, of course, because that's where all this started, that suggest that giving what we call convalescent plasma, this plasma that has antibodies against COVID, to patients who are ill, improves their clinical status. That is to say, if they are on a machine to help them breathe, they tend to get off. If they're on large amounts of oxygen so that they can get enough oxygen, they're able to wean that down. They've also seen some other positive effects of giving this therapy. Fever goes down, the virus disappears from the bloodstream, aches and pains get better, and there are various other parameters. Blood tests normalize. So there's pretty good evidence, although it's uncontrolled. But to be honest, every single therapy we have for COVID right now is really uncontrolled. There's pretty good evidence that this will help. The word gets out, and people have been calling me locally and in our own hospital and other hospitals with patients that are ill. They really have to have just severe illness, which is not hard to have. They have to have significant oxygen requirements or respiratory distress or low oxygen counts, those kind of things, and they would qualify for the study. And then the way this happened is that I heard about this study on Friday, that it was approved. I immediately applied. There were a number of forms to fill out, and we got word on Monday that we could go ahead and start enrolling patients. I think Monday or Tuesday I got my first call. Monday I got a call about could we get another investigational drug, which is not available, and that patient was transferred here. And Tuesday the team asked me to try and get that patient plasma, and the patient is supposed to get the plasma today. The key is you have to have a person who has recovered from COVID and has recovered long enough that we know those people are recovered and that they will have very likely, 39 to 40, say as this data we have, generated antibodies. But they have to also be a match. They have to be, their plasma has to be able to be given to a patient without the patient having, effects from a transfusion. So the key, especially in a state where we're just starting to see patients, there's something like 1,000, 1,100 patients, and I'm talking about yesterday, is to get those people who have recovered and have them come in and donate plasma so that we have a bank of plasma that we can give to the patients quickly. As I was talking about, we had a patient that was where they requested plasma on Tuesday, and we did not have plasma that was banked. So, so we had to, a provider, a blood bank provider, had to find a patient that was a match for our patient. That had to be tested, and then it's given to the patient. So that's why it has taken a few days. If, for example, last week somebody had donated and had compatible plasma, the patient would have already gotten the plasma.
Okay.
Usually, they have to have severe or critical infection with COVID. So, or be severely ill or critically ill with COVID. And those criteria are not all that strict, but they would have to have some evidence that there is some significant respiratory issue. That respiratory issue can be as mild as they need a lot of oxygen, or shorter breath when they, a shorter breath, or it can, of course, be as severe as they're on a ventilator with high amounts of support. What we don't want to do is, even though the therapy is pretty benign, we give this same type of plasma to people every week in the hospital who've taken too much blood thinner. So it's a pretty safe therapy. And that therapy does have antibodies, actually. But in this case, we're choosing it from people who will have antibodies to the flu. I mean, sorry, to COVID. I'm sorry, this is my third trial, 2 of which were flu, so flu is still there, I guess. So similar trials have been done for influenza and controlled trials for influenza, and previous trials have been done for the 2 previous coronaviruses. And when I say they've been kind of similar to this. The things that have make this a better candidate even, or better candidate of the coronaviruses that have happened so far, that we've seen so far, the 2 ones being SARS-1, now 1. It used to be, obviously it was SARS, and now it became SARS-1, which was around 2003, 2004, and then MERS, which is a Middle East respiratory virus. And those 2, they tried to use serum therapy. There was a little bit of promise, very small trials, but for various reasons, because of the short duration and small number of people with SARS, and because unlike this virus, the people with MERS don't make a lot of antibodies. In this, things that make this a good candidate, things that make coronavirus a good candidate for being treated, is that people who recover from coronavirus make a lot of antibody. They have a good response, and the virus hangs around for a long time. And so you have a little bit of time. You have a little bit of time to give the therapy, and for it still to be useful. And you also should have a large population of people who have recovered from COVID that could potentially donate and provide you with something to give the patients. I think if you're a patient or a family member who has a family member of somebody who was sick with COVID, the difference from a regular trial is that all patients enrolled in this trial, assuming that the doctors are okay with it and things don't change, all patients will receive therapy once they sign up. Obviously, like any trial, anybody can withdraw from a trial at any time. So if somebody got cold feet at the last minute and said, I don't want the plasma for whatever reason, they can stop at any time. But the trial is designed so that every patient who signs up and wants to get the plasma, as long as we can find a match, will get the plasma. COVID. That's a good question. It's a very good question. There are probably the current way that you could document that you had coronavirus infection is to have a standard, what's called a PCR test, when they swab you and they do a really sensitive test to see if you've had it. That's the current way of doing it. And you would have to have had the infection when you were, you would have to have the infection at the time that they did the swab. There are tests to see if you make, let's say the person says, you know, I was sick about a month ago, and I think I probably had COVID because I had all the symptoms they described, but I never got tested. Can I donate? We are getting tests. There are tests in development. There are some early tests that are already being used to see if you were infected and are producing antibodies to COVID. So there would be a way of determining that you did have COVID, you can donate, and that your donation would be valuable. Now, are we ready to do that, you know, as of like right now? I can't promise that, but I know that that is certainly something that people are very busy working on, and that we are developing tests basically as we speak. So I'm suspecting that that if they contacted the OBI, and we'll give the websites at the end, that OBI would have a place for them, that when they get the test, the antibody test, the person could go in, get their blood drawn, see if they have the antibodies, see if they had COVID, and then be able to donate. Now, it might be a little more complicated. You might have to come back or whatever, or they might just get you to donate plasma, test your plasma, and see if it could be used. But I think that is coming. Well, I'm a little concerned. Well, I guess there's two questions there. One is, how confident am I going to, that this works? You know, I do research a significant amount of the time, so I hedge my bets. I think there's very good evidence that this will help. This is a very difficult thing, in very difficult disease and situation for us to be able to do very controlled studies. So do I have 100% confidence? No. Do I have pretty good confidence? I think in all the small studies that have been published so far, it has shown a clear benefit. So yes, I think it's going to work. The second question is, how are we doing on plasma donation? I think that's the thing that's going to hold this up. If we had people that would, you know, contact the OBI through these websites and arrange to, you know, say, I've had it, and they were contacted, I think we would be able to give this out, you know, almost every time a patient came into the ICU. But we don't have that. The two people that we are in the process of treating, someone had to find a match for that, had to find matched plasma, and it wasn't just routine. So I think that is the big holdup: is, are we going to have enough donors? Are there going to be enough people who are going to donate plasma to get people treated? I think so. So plasma can be frozen and stored, and so we will. I think if plasma is donated and it can be used, not just immediately, it can be frozen and used for people down the line. Our difficulty is that we need a therapy before we have the peak of illness from people who have the illness. And we kind of need the cake before we've mixed all the ingredients, and that's a really so we need some of those early people who have recovered from this illness to donate. And I guess a good question would be, can we get that material from other states? You know, kind of like we're probably going to get ventilators from other states. You know, I think that's how we might have gotten one of our patients' plasma, because people are calling around to try and find this. It would appear that everyone in the state today, well, 39 of 40, whatever it is, about 97% of the people who have recovered will have antibodies and should have antibodies for the next few months. And as we get the antibody tests, the test that I was talking about, as we get that more refined, we'll be able to test the plasma and make sure that they have antibody. Right now, we are so in the beginning of this thing. We are giving plasma from people who have recovered that's safe to do, and assuming that that's 39 of the, that there's an overwhelming likelihood that they're going to have enough asthma to help, antibodies to help someone. You can donate plasma once a month, according to the OBI. I just asked them that question the other day. So I would hope every place is thinking about doing these kind of things, because we do not have any proven therapy. There are a number of therapies that have shown in small trials to possibly be helpful. And I think as long as they're not toxic, I think we should be trying them. You know, as long as we're not hurting people, we should be trying them. And we as physicians, we always evaluate or weigh in our minds, what's the chances we're going to help somebody with a therapy like this? What the chances we're going to potentially hurt somebody with a therapy like this? I'm convinced, based on the fact that we give this thing called, this is called fresh frozen plasma, basically. We give it all the time to people who take too much blood thinner, all the time. And we don't hesitate to do it for that reason. So I think the risk is very low. The evidence is fairly good, pretty good, that it'll help, and I think it's worth the risk versus benefits is definitely in favor of giving it and being involved. So I think because we're trying to help people, you know, because we're in Oklahoma, we should think of ourselves like being from any place else that has a problem for which we need some help. We need to try and help the people in our community figure out how to get better, and that's why I think we should be involved. So it is a blood product. It is tested like any blood product. There is a small risk of there's a small risk of getting too much fluid in, which is normally not a problem. There are some kind of unusual reactions, inflammatory reactions. That is very uncommon, and it is based on the mortality of this illness. If you're in this condition, if you're very ill with COVID, your chances of having a bad outcome from the COVID itself is way more than your chances of having an adverse reaction to this particular treatment and having a problem from that. Yeah, there are two ways of doing this. One, you could do it as part of this trial, and since what the Mayo Clinic has done, the Mayo Clinic is not distributing plasma. The Mayo Clinic is not actually making arrangements to match plasma donors and plasma recipients. What the Mayo Clinic has done is to streamline the process as much as it can be streamlined for local physicians like me to go ahead and give this product to patients. So that's the one way to do it. That's the way I chose to do it, because the other way of doing it is, in my opinion, much more complicated, is to use it under an emergency use protocol, which requires, is much less controlled, and I think is much more time-consuming and inefficient. Less people will be treated, in my opinion.
Do we know?
So there are clinical trials. There are, the last time I looked, sorry to blink, but the last time I looked, I was trying to remember, there were over 300 clinical trials registered in the United States. Now, many of those are observational, but there are trials to look at chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine. There were trials to look at immune modulation. There were trials to look at this. I'm trying to think of other trials that I scrolled through. Obviously, I was looking for trials like this, but there are over 300 studies in the United States. Most of them are observational. Only a small fraction of them are treatment-oriented. I think critical care physicians are control freaks. We tell our families that we're not, but we are, and perhaps most physicians are control freaks. I hope that we have some control of this thing. The hardest thing to deal with is this uncertainty and this feeling that this disease could take you or a member of your family. And I hope we have some confidence that we've got some control of this illness, that we have some treatments that work. We give these kind of therapies to patients and they get better. And we feel like if somebody that we love or care about, or ourselves, got this illness, that we wouldn't just be kind of throwing up our hands and just seeing what happened. That's what I hope for.